Listen carefully. Before this story begins, imagine standing more than 5,000 meters above sea level. The air is so thin that every breath feels borrowed. The wind never truly stops. There are no villages, no roads, no voices, only rock, ice, and silence. The Himalayas have always inspired stories. Some speak of enlightened sages who disappeared into these mountains. Some tell of sacred peaks where gods were believed to dwell. Others whisper of places that ordinary people were never meant to disturb. Most of those stories belong to legend. This one begins with evidence. Hidden among these mountains is a small glacial lake. For most of the year, it does not exist, at least not to the human eye. Winter seals it beneath thick ice. Fresh snow erases every trace of its shoreline. Storm after storm buries it beneath a white silence that can last for months. It waits, patiently. Then summer arrives. The sun reaches the frozen basin for only a short time. The ice begins to crack. Water slowly appears beneath the surface. And with it, the mountain begins to reveal something it has been protecting for centuries. At first, it looks like nothing more than a pale shape beneath the water. Perhaps a smooth stone, perhaps a fallen branch. You step closer. The water is astonishingly clear. Then the shape comes into focus. It is not a stone, it is a human skull. You look again. Another lies only a few steps away. Then another, and another. Suddenly, the shoreline is no longer a shoreline. It has become a silent resting place for hundreds of people whose names have almost disappeared from history. No memorial stands here. No carved monument tells visitors what happened. No inscription records the final moments of the dead. Only bones, scattered across one of the highest and most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. The first question seems obvious. Who were they? But that is not the question that has troubled archaeologists the most. The deeper they investigated, the more unsettling another question became. Why were they here at all? Today, the world knows this place as Skeleton Lake. Its official name is Roopkund. It lies high in the Indian Himalayas, in what is now the state of Uttarakhand. Even today, reaching the lake requires days of climbing through steep mountain trails, unpredictable weather, and thinning air. Nothing about the journey is easy. Nothing about the landscape invites large groups of people to gather here, which makes what happened even more difficult to explain, because this is not where history expects to find hundreds of human remains. For centuries, the mountain kept its secret almost perfectly. The altitude protected it. The snow protected it. The isolation protected it. Generation after generation passed without the outside world knowing what rested beneath the ice. Until the summer of 1942, the world was at war. Across Europe and Asia, millions of lives were being changed forever. No one was searching the Himalayas for an ancient mystery. History was looking somewhere else. But history has a habit of revealing itself when no one is expecting it. That summer, a forest ranger named Hari Kishan Madwal was traveling through these mountains during a routine patrol. He was not an archaeologist. He was not searching for lost civilizations. He was simply following a familiar route through a landscape he thought he understood. Then something caught his attention near the edge of the lake, a pale object resting against dark stone. He walked closer. It was a bone. A few steps farther, another. Soon he realized he was no longer looking at a single set of remains. Bones appeared beneath the shallow water. Others lay exposed along the rocky shoreline where the melting ice had released them from the frozen ground. The discovery was unlike anything he, or anyone else, had ever seen. News quickly reached the British administration governing India at the time. With the Second World War still unfolding, one alarming possibility immediately emerged. Could these be the remains of Japanese soldiers attempting to cross the Himalayas in secret? If that were true, the discovery was not merely archaeological. It was a matter of military concern. Investigators were sent to examine the site, but almost immediately, the evidence began to tell a different story. The bones did not belong to recent victims. The weathering was too extensive. The objects found beside them were far older than anything connected to the modern war. The first explanation collapsed, and with it, the real investigation finally began. Who were these people? What brought them to one of the most remote lakes in the Himalayas? And why had the mountain guarded their story for so long? Those questions would lead archaeologists, historians, and scientists into a mystery that would become stranger with every new discovery. Because the bones were only the beginning. The mountain was still holding back its greatest secret. Every mystery begins with a question. Some are answered by history, others by science. But in the Himalayas, there is another source of memory that has survived for centuries. Story. Long before archaeologists climbed these mountains, long before laboratories studied ancient bones, the people who lived beneath these peaks believed they already knew why the lake should never be disturbed. To understand that belief, we have to leave the shoreline behind and look toward one of the most sacred mountains in northern India, Nanda Devi. To millions of Hindus, Nanda Devi is far more than a mountain. She is revered as a goddess, a guardian whose presence is believed to sanctify the surrounding landscape. For generations, pilgrims have crossed these mountains during the Nanda Devi Raj Jat Yatra, one of India's oldest and most demanding pilgrimages. The journey is not simply a test of endurance. It is an act of devotion. Every step is taken with humility. Every mountain pass is approached with respect. Among the communities who have preserved these traditions, one story has endured for centuries. It speaks of a king remembered in local tradition as Raja Jastaval. According to the legend, he set out toward the sacred mountains with his queen, attendants, musicians, and members of the royal court. What began as a pilgrimage slowly became a celebration. Music echoed through the valleys. The royal procession grew louder, more extravagant. The legend says the sacred silence of the mountains was broken. Then everything changed. Dark clouds gathered over the peaks. The wind rose without warning, and from the sky came a storm so violent that those caught in the open had nowhere to hide. The legend remembers enormous hailstones falling upon the procession. One after another, the travelers collapsed. None returned. For generations, many people believed that the skeletons beside the lake belonged to that forgotten pilgrimage. Whether the legend preserves a historical event cannot be confirmed, but it preserved something equally important, a memory that linked the mountain, the storm, and the dead. For decades, that memory remained only a story. Then the bones themselves began to speak. When forensic researchers carefully examined many of the skulls recovered from the lake, they noticed a striking pattern. Several individuals showed rounded fractures on the tops of their skulls. The injuries did not resemble sword wounds. They did not resemble arrow wounds, nor did they match the crushing damage usually associated with rock falls. Instead, they suggested repeated impacts from hard, rounded objects striking from above. It was an unexpected clue, one that pointed toward the sky. Researchers proposed that an exceptionally severe hailstorm at high altitude could have produced ice stones powerful enough to cause fatal head injuries. In an exposed alpine basin with almost no natural shelter, such a storm could have been catastrophic. For the first time, the ancient legend and the physical evidence appeared to move in the same direction. A sacred journey, a deadly storm, a sudden tragedy. The explanation was not only dramatic, it was scientifically plausible for at least some of the remains. To many observers, the mystery of Skeleton Lake finally seemed to make sense. The mountain had claimed a group of pilgrims. The legend had preserved their memory. Science had explained their deaths. The investigation appeared complete, or so it seemed, because hidden inside the bones was another kind of evidence. Evidence that no one had been able to read in 1942. Evidence that would challenge nearly every conclusion that had come before. For many years, the investigation seemed to be reaching its conclusion. The injuries on the skulls pointed toward a violent hailstorm. The ancient legends spoke of a deadly storm descending from the mountains. Archaeology and local tradition appeared to support one another. It was not a perfect explanation, but it was convincing enough that many believed the central mystery had finally been solved. Then, science advanced. Not through a dramatic new discovery in the mountains, but inside the laboratory. A new generation of researchers returned to Skeleton Lake with questions their predecessors had never been able to ask. This time, they were not searching for broken weapons. They were not looking for hidden ruins. Instead, they turned their attention to something far smaller and far more revealing: ancient DNA. Unlike a fracture on a skull, DNA can preserve traces of ancestry carried across countless generations. Combined with radiocarbon dating, it can also help determine whether people lived during the same period or centuries apart. The expectation seemed straightforward. If the lake preserved the victims of a single catastrophic pilgrimage, the scientific evidence should tell one consistent story. The first results arrived. Then another set. Then another. Something did not fit. At first, the researchers suspected the problem might be technical. Ancient DNA is fragile. Contamination is always a possibility. The samples were checked again. The laboratory procedures were reviewed. Independent analyses were compared. The data refused to change. The first surprise came from radiocarbon dating. The people around the lake had not all lived during the same period of history. Some remains dated to one era. Others belonged to a very different time. The difference was not measured in years. It was measured in centuries. Silence filled the investigation, because one question suddenly had no answer. If these people had not died together, why were they found together? The accepted story began to fracture. Perhaps the hailstorm explained one tragedy, but it could no longer explain every skeleton surrounding the lake. The investigation continued. Researchers now focused on ancestry. Again, they expected consistency. Again, the evidence surprised them. The genetic profiles did not all belong to a single ancestral population. Some individuals shared ancestry associated with populations from the Indian subcontinent. That was expected. Others did not. The researchers repeated the analysis. Different methods, different comparisons. The conclusion remained the same. Only then did the full significance of the discovery become clear. Among the people preserved beside this isolated Himalayan lake was a group whose ancestry showed close connections with populations associated with the Eastern Mediterranean. The finding astonished the scientific community. Thousands of kilometers separated those regions from Roopkund. No known historical record describes a journey bringing such people to this remote glacial basin. No surviving inscription tells their story. No local tradition remembers their arrival. Yet their presence had been preserved in the only place that could not forget: their own DNA. At that moment, the mystery changed forever. Researchers were no longer trying to explain a single disaster. They were trying to understand why different people, from different backgrounds, and from different periods of history, had all become part of the same silent landscape. The mountain had not been guarding one tragedy. It had been guarding multiple unanswered stories. Science had not destroyed the mystery. It had expanded it. Every answer uncovered another question. Every discovery revealed another missing piece. And the most difficult question of all still remained. Why did this forgotten lake keep drawing people to it across the centuries? That question has never been answered, and it is the reason Skeleton Lake continues to challenge archaeologists, geneticists, historians, and explorers to this day. The investigation had reached its greatest breakthrough. At the very same moment, it had also reached its greatest uncertainty. Because sometimes, the most important discovery is not finding an answer. It is realizing that the question itself was never what we thought it was. When the investigation began, the question seemed simple. Who were the people lying beside this frozen lake? Decades later, that question had changed. The scientists had identified patterns of injury. They had reconstructed parts of the timeline. They had uncovered unexpected genetic histories. Yet none of those discoveries produced a single story that explained everything. Instead, they revealed something far more unusual. Skeleton Lake is not one mystery. It is several mysteries, preserved in the same place. Some evidence points toward a violent natural disaster. Some points toward repeated human journeys separated by centuries. Some can be explained. Some cannot. This is where archaeology becomes different from legend. Legends often offer complete stories. History rarely does. History survives in fragments. A broken skull, a worn sandal, a weathered wooden object, a strand of ancient DNA. Each fragment carries part of the truth. None carries all of it. That is why Roopkund continues to fascinate researchers around the world. Not because science has failed, but because science has revealed how much remains unknown. Every generation has brought new tools, new methods, new questions, and every generation has discovered that the mountain still refuses to surrender all of its secrets. Perhaps one day, new excavations, new technologies, or evidence still hidden beneath the ice will explain why people from different backgrounds and different centuries all became part of this extraordinary place. Perhaps they will not, because history is not always a book waiting to be finished. Sometimes, some history is a conversation that never truly ends. Every answer changes the questions that follow. Every discovery reminds us how little of the past has actually survived. High above the forests, where the air grows thin and every sound is carried away by the wind, Roopkund remains exactly where it has always been, waiting. The snow returns each winter. The lake disappears beneath ice once more. The bones vanish from sight. The silence takes their place. For a few short weeks each year, the mountain allows us to look into its past. Then it quietly closes the door again. Long before archaeologists climbed these slopes, the Himalayas were already guarding this place. Long after today's researchers are gone, they will continue to do so. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson Skeleton Lake has to offer. Not that history always gives us answers, but that the search for truth demands patience, humility, and the willingness to accept that some mysteries are larger than any single explanation. Because between legend and evidence, between faith and science, between memory and history, there is still a space where certainty disappears. And in that silence, beneath the frozen waters of a forgotten Himalayan lake, the mountain continues to remember, even if we do not.